Ukrainian forces have been fighting back against Russian assaults on the outskirts of Kiev. Authorities are urging citizens to defend the capital. Weapons, including guns, are being given out to residents. The Ukrainian army says it repelled an assault on a military base in the capital. Russia says it has launched a barrage of cruise missiles and rockets against Ukraine.
An early morning missile strike on a residential block in Kiev. Here's the moment of impact from inside one of the apartments. While Russia says it's only targeting military facilities, Ukrainian officials call this a cynical attack on civilian infrastructure. No deaths have yet been reported. But for some, it was very close. It was a direct hit into the living room. We were lucky to escape because we were in the kitchen. My wife and our older child have had their legs broken. The younger one was taken somewhere by the rescuers. I'm looking for him now. And that's why many civilians are sheltering in basements. Or fleeing altogether, streaming towards Ukraine's western borders. 100,000 have crossed into Poland this week. As they seek a safe haven in the EU, their president wants the regional bloc to go one further and fast-track Ukraine's membership. Residential buildings destroyed by missiles and artillery are the final argument for the world to join us in stopping this occupational invasion. I say it as frankly as possible. The Ukrainian people deserve and have the right to get membership of the European Union. This will be the main evidence of support for our country. Still, his forces claim they're repelling the Russian advance. Moscow says it's launching missiles from both the air and sea. The two countries fighting a propaganda battle as the war rages on.
Let's speak now to Andrea Jeska, a reporter specializing in crises, migration, and human rights, who joins us now from Ukraine. She's on the phone because she says she's at a secret location, which, of course, she can't disclose. Andrea, tell us what's been happening around you.
We are standing in front of Kiev's main police station at the moment, and there's a long, long queue of mainly young men who want to join the territorial defense and go in there and come back out with ammunition and Kalashnikovs. And they all say they're going to fight until the end, and they are ready to sacrifice their life for the country, and they are all persuaded that they can beat the Russians. We heard some artillery fire this morning in the city, about 5 or 6 streets away from where we are staying. It came from two sides, so it seems there's street fighting going on already. And people are desperately buying food in the few shops that are still open, but everything is mainly gone. It's hard to get anything to eat anymore. Everything is closed, of course. The metro is not running anymore. So the city is very, very quiet right now.
I just want to ask you very quickly about those men that you saw essentially enlisting. Was there a look of resolve in these people's eyes, or was there just a sense of this is their duty?
Well, I think they consider it their duty. They are not really willing to talk to us. This is something that we have experienced in the past 2 days also, that the sentiment against Europe is quite bad right now. People feel that we deserted them. They feel helpless. They are asking us why we don't do anything and why we don't help. So they are not really eager to talk to Western journalists anymore, most of them. And yesterday we had a scene where there was alarm, and we were in one of the bunkers, and we were told to go because they didn't want Europeans there. So yeah, that's how people feel here now. They really feel deserted by Europe.
You're a journalist. What are your fears now regarding press freedom and the ability of the media to report on what's happening in the country?
I think the problem is that the news will come within seconds, and nobody can follow really anymore what's going on. The interesting thing is that within the city, it is really hard to know what is going on. There are just so many rumors going around, and people, of course, pick up these rumors, and there's a lot of bullshit that is being told here. What supposedly is happening, which when you do some fact-checking is not true. But yeah, emotions are high, and people are not very sensible anymore about what they say.
Understood. That's Andrea Yeska in Ukraine. Many thanks and stay safe, of course.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeated a call to Ukrainian soldiers to surrender, also making baseless accusations against the Ukrainian government.
Once again, I appeal to the servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine. Do not allow neo-Nazis to use your children, your wives and elderly as human shields. Take power into your own hands. It seems that it would be easier for us to come to an agreement than with this gang of drug addicts and neo-Nazis who settled in Kiev and took the entire Ukrainian people hostage.
Journalist Sergei Satanovsky joins me now from Moscow. Sergei, Putin there, of course, calling on the Ukrainian armed forces to stage a coup, essentially. What's the feeling in Russia as to how Putin's war is going?
The reactions inside Russia are very different. You can see jubilation only on state-run TV channels. There, the propaganda machine says that Russia is acting like a great power, like the USA. They also dehumanize Ukrainian officials. You could hear it yesterday. The President Putin called Ukrainian leaders as a bunch of junkies. Yes, but also people feel different feelings. I mean, I spoke to the people who live in Belgorod. They're sitting next to the border with Ukraine, and they haven't been living under stress for several days, seeing tanks just outside their windows. And for last 3 days, they can hear the sound of explosions that also cause windows trembling, so it's very stressful for them. And you also can see people get out to the streets of Moscow, of St. Petersburg and other cities of Russia that protest against the invasion of Ukraine.
I understand the Kremlin has moved to tighten restrictions on social media, most notably access to Facebook. What more can you tell us?
Yes, lots of people cannot access Facebook well and also Twitter. Russian media watchdog Roskomnadzor says that it is a reaction to Facebook blocking Russian state-run TV channels like Zvezda and also some in the mass media like Lenta.ru and Gazeta.ru. But also a lot of independent mass media expect that they can be blocked in just recent hours because Roskomnadzor prohibits to use the term war while talking about the conflict in Ukraine. They said it is a Russian military operation in Ukraine, and that's what every mass media in Russia should use.
We've seen protests in many Russian cities. How broad is the opposition to this war in Russia?
It seems like it is a huge opposition in Russia. Thousands of scientists, journalists, even doctors and teachers sign letters, open letters, petitions against the war. Also, a lot of celebrities, prominent people in Russia, like singers, writers, post anti-war publications on Instagram. They post black square and say no to war. So it seems like opposition is really great in Russia.
Really appreciate your time and perspective. Journalist Sergei Satanovsky, many, many thanks.
Thank you.
The European Union has already imposed economic sanctions on Russia. French naval forces have now intercepted a cargo vessel loaded with cars heading for Russia. They suspect it belongs to a company targeted by the sanctions. President Emmanuel Macron fears the war in Ukraine will have lasting consequences for Europe.
If I can tell you one thing this morning, it is that this crisis will last. This war will last, and all the crises that come with it will have lasting consequences. And so we must prepare for this with great determination and great solidarity.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is meeting with Poland's Prime Minister and Lithuania's President here in Berlin to discuss further sanctions on Russia. Western nations have already imposed a wide range of sanctions following the invasion of Ukraine. On Friday, both the U.S. and the EU announced plans to put sanctions directly on President Vladimir Putin and his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. But the Polish government says it wants the EU to go further and sanction Russia much more harshly. We're joined now in the studio by our political correspondent, Thomas Sparrow. Thomas, German Chancellor Scholz met with the leaders of Poland and Lithuania today. How significant is this meeting?
It is very significant, and we already heard from Poland's leader why he actually came to Berlin. He said that he wanted to shake Germany's conscience, asking Germany to leave its selfishness aside.
Strong words.
Extremely strong words from Poland's leader towards Germany's Olaf Scholz. In particular, what Poland wants, you already mentioned one of the two elements, is much stronger sanctions towards Russia. One of the key elements there is Germany's reluctance to go with other European countries and ban Russia from the SWIFT financial system. The second element which Poland wants is for Germany to send weapons to Ukraine. It is, by the way, a request that Ukraine has stressed many times. And so far, Germany has only promised to send 5,000 helmets. In fact, those 5,000 helmets were delivered on Friday from Germany to Ukraine. There's a big debate here in this country as to why Germany has so far not sent any weapons to Ukraine, as other countries have done, like the United States or like the United Kingdom.
And let's go back to that ban on the SWIFT financial system. Germany is holding out here in Europe. Please explain what the thinking is on that.
Essentially, what Germany believes is that by doing that, by blocking Russia from the SWIFT system, there will be significant collateral damage. I'm quoting here Germany's Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, in particular because this system is used not only for German businesses that carry out business affairs with Russia, but also for payments on gas deliveries. And there's a specific fear that has been expressed, for example, by Germany's finance minister, that gas deliveries to Germany could be cut if indeed the European Union decides to ban Russia from this SWIFT system. However, Germany has stressed that they are open to discussing taking Russia out of SWIFT as long as the consequences for specific European countries are also taken into consideration. So Germany is one of the few European Union countries that still remains hesitant when it comes to this SWIFT decision.
And everybody here in Europe is very nervous about what's going on with energy sources right now. You know, we're also hearing about the first group of basically refugees leaving Ukraine as a result of this conflict, having arrived here in Germany. What more can you tell us about that?
And this is actually another big and potentially difficult element of this whole crisis. United Nations estimates say that already over 100,000 people have fled Ukraine, that if their estimates prove to be correct, if the war continues, if the war intensifies, there could be up to 4 million people leaving Ukraine. And the first people fleeing the war in Ukraine have already arrived here in Germany, in particular in the eastern part of the country, so in the German state that borders with Poland. Already officials there stressing that they're preparing for the arrival of around 10,000 people. The first families have also arrived here in Berlin. Berlin officials also saying that they're preparing for this arrival. So there's also a lot happening in that regard, preparing for the arrival of people who are fleeing the war in Ukraine.
An onslaught. Thomas Sparrow, thank you so much. Now, many of the people caught up in the invasion have fled to neighboring countries. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians have already left. Most are headed to countries bordering Ukraine. These include EU members Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, as well as non-member Moldova. As fighting worsens, these nations are now bracing for more refugees in the coming days.
The train station in the Polish city of Przemysl, 10 kilometers from Ukraine. For many Ukrainian refugees, it's their first stop after crossing the border. These 4 children are having their first hot meal in 30 hours after traveling 450 kilometers through Ukraine. Their fathers weren't able to join them. They stayed behind to fight. The children are now waiting for their mothers to arrive.
There were masses of people on the way. We took a bus towards the border and then walked. Then we stood in a long queue. Suddenly we saw our cousins, and we've been together since then. We waited a long time for the transport from the border. And now we're finally here.
The way was hard and long. Because of traffic jams, they had to get off the bus and walk the last 15 kilometers to the border. Near Lviv, they heard explosions.
It was terrible. There were rockets flying. We came here without passports. We only have our birth certificates. We were let into Poland as refugees.
The Polish authorities have decided to let all Ukrainians into the country, even those who have no passports, which are normally required to enter the EU. At the train station, as well as in several reception centres, they are supported by volunteers and the military. The refugees are relieved to have escaped the war, but they're also worried about what they have left behind, the events in their country. Those who are not picked up here by friends or relatives are taken in by private individuals. The willingness to help is great. Within a day of the Russian invasion, 30,000 refugees arrived in Poland from Ukraine. The government in Warsaw expects that up to 1 million people could flee to the country, and it promises that they will all be taken in.
Let's bring in our DW correspondent Max Zander, who is at the train station in Przemysl. Max, more than 100,000 Ukrainian refugees have already arrived in Poland. Describe the situation there.
Well, we're at the train station here in Przemysl, as you rightly pointed out, and it just became a lot more busy over the last few minutes. The last train from Ukraine just came in and brought a lot of new people, and people here actually, Polish locals, people from the city council, firefighters, as well as soldiers, are working very hard to provide help, provide immediate donations like these food donations over here, and services to the people here who arrive here at the airport. So they're handing out food, but they're also helping them with their next travel arrangements, trying to bring them together with family and relatives if there are some in Poland or in neighboring countries, or if not, help them with accommodation, bring them to some of the reception centers that have been put in place here in the country. And the Interior Minister, Deputy Interior Minister of Poland, came to the area this morning and spoke to the press and said, pointed out more than 100,000 people already have crossed from Ukraine to Poland, and there are likely going to be a lot more. Numbers, conservative estimates were about 1 million, but perhaps they're going to be even more than that. But it seems that authorities and locals are doing their uttermost to provide assistance to the people who have come here already.
Max, it's literally buzzing there. I can't imagine that there's going to be a let-up anytime soon. The refugees are often on the road for hours. I imagine they arrive having not slept or eaten much. What condition are they in?
That's absolutely right. I mean, people are leaving Ukraine for a reason. People are anxious. People have fear. People have experienced trauma, perhaps, but also they are just very exhausted. The trip through Ukraine and then also the last leg crossing the border takes a lot of time. The land crossings have been particularly difficult, the car crossings, because there have been huge pileups of traffic. People had to leave their cars and walk the last few kilometers to cross the border, so people who arrive there are naturally very exhausted. In addition to that, the Ukrainian authorities made it changed the crossings, the style of the crossings, that you cannot cross by car from Ukraine to Poland any longer, because a lot of the drivers were male, and they're trying to keep anybody of the fighting age between 18 and 60 in the country. So now people who leave Ukraine and cross the border to Poland actually have to walk, or if they come by train here to the train station, it's also very difficult because you're dealing with a lot of checks for the same reason, and a lot of delays. So people here are in a very difficult state.
Max, I wonder, how do people on the ground in Poland actually view this attack in Ukraine? Are they angry, or is there fear that perhaps Russia may have them in its sights?
I mean, that's difficult to say. I mean, everybody across the board is worried. That's for sure. There has been historic mistrust to Russia for especially some older parts of the Polish generation. So people are viewing very closely what's happening, and a lot of people are afraid that that violence may spill over, and that perhaps being in the European Union and being in NATO might not be enough protection after all. But at the moment, the situation it's very fast moving, of course, and people are obviously worried and watching very closely what's happening.
Max Zander with a group of very tired and hungry people there in Przemysl. Many, many thanks. DW correspondent Fanny Fachar joins us on the line, and actually we see pictures of her there. She was in Kyiv, but is no longer there, has moved to another location altogether. Fanny, tell us where you are and what's going on around you.
I'm in Khmelnytsky, which is normally about 4 hours from Kyiv. It actually took us 14 hours yesterday to get here. And what you actually see behind me is normally a theater, but it's no longer a theater, but it has become a refugee center for internally displaced people from all regions of Ukraine trying to find a shelter here. Now, on the other side, just across from this shelter, you see a long line of people, volunteers, men of all ages, trying to sign up to help Ukraine defend itself. What's happening really here in Khmelnytsky is something it also tells you what the situation right now is in Ukraine, and that is a combination of panic, a combination of resistance, and still a hope, though, that it may not go as far as a lot of people are worried that it may, that this is going to be a war for a long time to come. People are hoping that there is going to be a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia to prevent the death and the further bloodshed among civilians, among soldiers, and everyone involved here in this situation in Ukraine.
And funny, as we saw those images of people who are now displaced, you get the sense that this is certainly just the beginning. What have you heard from Ukraine's capital, Kyiv?
What's happening in Kyiv is basically just a big mess right now. People are panicking. They're trying to find shelter, go to the metro station. The mayor of Kyiv declared that all metros are not going to operate any longer. They are only operating as bunkers, as shelters. Now, we have seen, of course, heart-wrenching pictures of children huddling together, scared. And it is a very critical situation, as we are hearing that the Russian military troops are building up around the city. Apparently only 30 kilometers from the city center, there is a heavy Russian troop build-up, but already there are Russian soldiers on the ground in Kyiv. So it's expected that street fights between Ukrainian and Russian forces are about to begin or even to escalate. At the same time, the President Zelenskyy, appeared in a video on social media early this morning, basically trying to show, I'm still here, I'm not going to lay down arms, because he said rumors have it that people think that he is going to urge people people to lay down their arms and demilitarize, as it's being expected by Russian President Vladimir Putin. So a lot of chaos, in fact, what is engulfing right now Kyiv, and it's really unclear what the next hours are going to bring there, just like it's unclear what's going to happen to the rest of the country, as there's so many explosions across the country in various regions, even though the most intense shelling so far still is in the east and in the southern and in the northern parts of Ukraine.
Okay, that's DW's Funny Fachar. Many thanks, Funny, and please stay safe. You're watching DW News. Here's the main story we're following for you. Recapping the latest developments, Ukraine's military says it repelled an assault by Russian troops on an army base in Kyiv, about 40 kilometers south of Kyiv. The mayor says there were heavy casualties. Russian news agency Interfax reports that its forces have taken control of the Ukrainian city of Melitopol. If confirmed, this would be the first major city to fall. Street fighting continues in the capital, Kyiv. Intense gunfire and explosions rocked the city overnight. A missile has struck an apartment block in a Kiev suburb that Russian forces were attempting to capture. Russia says it is firing rockets and cruise missiles.